Hi, my name is Jon Swedenborg. I'm a current senior here at the University of Miami. I'm going to be graduating in about 3 months. For my Nature as a Symbol video project, I'm going to be talking about serpents. Specifically talk about Christianity, but also talk about everything, just to kind of give like a bigger grasp about it, because snakes are probably the most symbolic animal, one of the most symbolic things that we have, I would say, in society, culturally, religiously. But there is kind of an array of different interpretations and different ways that people and cultures and traditions, religions have kind of taken to it and kind of looked at it and viewed it in a certain type of way. I think a lot of it just comes to the root that just snakes were ours, I guess less now, but predatory animal. I think that there's just a natural instinctual impulse when we see a stick to jump out of the way thinking it's a snake. I think it's just something that's so ingrained to us that I would imagine that the symbolism came as a response to that, right? Snakes are just kind of a representation of a lot of what we're afraid of, and it's a good way to summarize that. I think we can look at it not just humans, but people, cats. I mean, cats like looking at a pickle or looking at a stick and immediately thinking it's a steak is a good evolutionary thing. I think just due to that trend that it kind of snakes became like a summarization of all our own fears and like of the unknown. And we just put into one thing that was kind of like a central figure that could be applied to it, because there's a lot of snake adjacent things. Crocodiles, dragons, like a lot of things that like symbolically kind of represent chaos and disorder and things that we're not able to control. And I think that's kind of how it got applied to all of them. It was kind of a commonality thing. Snakes also have become a symbol for threats just in general, not just like outside threats, but internal things. In the Bible, the threat is sin. It's something from within ourselves. Obviously, snakes in the real world application are very scary because they're outside of us, but it's kind of taken on a double meaning in both of those. I was also listening to a podcast earlier. One of the clips was talking about how we use the same circuitry in our brain for detecting threats, such as predators, as we do to process unknown things that upset us. So it's very interesting to see how our brains are wired for a certain type of way to group things into like a known or unknown category, chaos or order, and go from there. So I think there's just it's a good evolutionary thing that we kind of overreact to these type of things. We're able to overreact because it kind of allowed us to succeed. I think it's overall a good thing. So in the Bible, the snakes kind of get their root in the Garden of Eden. The snake is seen as sometimes it's just it's personal opinion, but sometimes it's just a snake, sometimes it's Satan himself, sometimes it's just a representation of sin. But overall, none are necessarily good things. They're all kind of negative things, have very negative connotation. And the snake tempted Eve to eat of the fruit of knowledge, and she ate it and got kicked out of the garden. So did Adam. And after that, the snake got punished to crawl forever on its belly and lost its limbs. So it's a symbol for sin, temptation, danger, negative human potential in the Bible, pushing away from God and leading into our own understanding and getting attached from the Lord. As the first story is kind of it's an interesting way to start it, but it kind of also places the high importance in having regard for yourself over God. It also gets referenced a couple times. The Leviathan is mentioned in the book of Job. And Jesus mentions snakes to describe the Pharisees, saying that the children of snakes, basically telling them that you are putting on this appearance where you are super religious and you're super all these beneficial things, and then inwardly you're driven by greed and pride and money and all these sins that you're not able to represent. And it's just this cunning nature of snakes that's often represented. Like there's a reason in Harry Potter, Slytherins are snakes. They're supposed to be the most cunning, deceitful, kind of make the most out of it. So it does have that symbolism to it. But also in Eastern traditions, snakes aren't necessarily the same thing. They're kind of seen for their more beneficial properties. They're seen as a renewal thing, protection, but like that due to like their like skin shedding properties, it's seen as something that it shows renewal, rebirth, health, vigor, a lot of beneficial things. And then ancient Greece is also an interesting one because it's represented commonly as a symbol of medicine, often the god of medicine, Asclepius. And so he has like the like the rod with the snakes wrapped around it. Still heavily implied and tied to the medical field, even though I feel like from Western traditions it's not seen the same positive light. Like there's still a hint of that. On the flip side of Greek mythology, there's also Medusa, who gets snake on her head. I think it was, yeah, snake on her head as a punishment for sleeping with Poseidon, and then ended up, anyone that looked her in the eyes immediately got turned into stone. I think that's kind of a representation just for lust and not leading with your eyes. Otherwise you're going to immediate negative punishment. So as for the natural element it represents, so it represents two. It represents earth, but it also represents water. It represents earth because I think a lot, just because of its natural propriety to be on the ground, super close to it, it makes sense. It's tied to the underworld in a lot of traditions. It's tied to death. It's tied to a lot of things like that. But it's also tied to water. An example of that is in Norse mythology. The sea serpent, Jormungand, is a giant sea serpent that circles the world with his mouth, his own tail. At the end of the world, in Ragnarok, it battles Thor. They both end up dying, but that's what happens. It's a kind of the big bad evil thing in the water lurking. You don't know what's out there. It's the reason the ships didn't come back. It's why you don't sail far away, at least in North traditions, because there's gonna be something bad out there, a sea serpent that's gonna take you down. It also is not necessarily always negative things when it comes to water, sometimes positive things, like in the Hopi tribe, there's this like the snake dance that happens, and it's people having snakes around them and dancing around with them, putting them in their mouth, having them on their body. And it's supposed to bring good seasons, fertile seasons, rainfall, so it is associated with good positive things also. I think modern day people, practitioners, interpret today, I think it's kind of interesting. I think it was previously it was an internal impulse where evolutionarily, like, it was such a strong reaction, and then there was a balance between it where our logic was kind of able to be like, no, there's good properties of it, there's bad properties of it, and then once the Abrahamic relations came in, it kind of switched it back over to kind of a negative light. But like, I think it's always going to be like a weird pendulum swinging, because like if you look at like Pentecostal snake handling, like that is a thing that has become more popular, and people believing that if they're able to handle these sins or temptations or these dangerous snakes, it's going to be God that's kind of protecting them. I think overall the symbol is used, though, at least in America and in the West, is that it is to reinforce our awareness of sin, lust, temptations, all of that, being able to control it, be able to put God first and us second. I don't think that there's really necessarily anything it could compare to in any other symbol, in any media, any news source, anything. I think it's such an integral and natural thing that just comes from within us that it's kind of unfair to try to put anything in comparison against it. I think it does represent everything that's scary, unknown, nothing that we're actually able to comprehend, but something that we just deal with and we have to face, internally and externally, and I think that's always what it's gonna stand for us on some level. Okay, so that's all I have for my presentation. Hope you enjoyed.